All right, well, I appreciate you both doing this.
Of course.
Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Vice President Vance, you dedicate this book to Usha. You write about her extensively in the book.
Sure.
Why was she so pivotal to your journey to faith?
Well, because one, she was the person who encouraged me most to do it. Usha said very early on that the business of thinking about my faith, thinking about converting, was good for me. And so I think that her encouragement was one of the things that needed to happen because when Usha and I started dating, I was sort of a proud atheist. I was kind of skeptical of religion and skeptical of religious people. And when I started thinking to myself, I might want to start going back to church, one of the big concerns I had was, well, Usha didn't really sign up for this, right? She didn't sign up for church every Sunday. She didn't sign up for a person who was a very devout Christian. And so I was worried that you were going to be, not supportive of that journey, but she was very supportive of the journey in ways that, big and small, right? She's supportive in the sense that when we take 3 little kids to church, they're always misbehaved. And so, she's one of the 2 people, including me, who's trying to deal with that. But she was supportive in, I think, more philosophical, almost theological ways. She just kept on talking about the way in which thinking about these things fundamentally made me a better person. And that kind of gave me the confidence I needed to go down this journey.
Usha, the Vice President, has written this book about his own faith journey, but how has your faith journey evolved alongside his own?
Well, I think in some ways it has been a very personal journey for him. I grew up in a Hindu household, a very stable household, and I've not felt the same sense of need to seek something different that he has. So I think the journey has been more in our relationship, right? Trying to understand where he is, the different ways he's thinking about things, how that fits into the life that we have together, and less a religious journey of my own.
An interfaith marriage, how does it work in day-to-day life?
Well, it's actually very easy. I mean, one, there's a certain dynamism to it because she comes at things from a different perspective than I do. And so it always leads to very interesting conversations. But, just practically what we've decided to do is raise the kids in the Christian church. We don't want to confuse little kids. Obviously, they can get confused. But we also haven't hidden anything about, her understanding of the world or, her parents, how they think about religious faith. So we've just tried to make it as easy and accessible to the kids as possible while, sending them to Christian schools and raising them in the Christian church. Our 6-year-old just got baptized a couple of weeks ago, actually. I guess a few weeks ago, it was Easter Sunday. But one of the things that's also interesting about it is because I was raised Protestant, I was raised in a very evangelical tradition. And typically, for example, evangelicals, Protestants don't get baptized until they're a little bit older. That's been an interesting thing too, because we've elected, it's almost like the fusion of Usha's perspective and my old evangelical upbringing. We don't baptize the kids when they're young. We let them make that decision when they're older. And so there are all of these interesting little ways in which it affects the practice of my faith, I think our relationship. But it's also just pretty easy, right? It's 2 people who love each other, 2 people who usually see the world in very similar ways, but not always. And I think that's true for most marriages, and it's made it very fun.
When you hear all that, what's your reaction as not only his spouse, but as someone who has their own tradition and your own views of the world and faith?
Well, I grew up in this country around people of a range of Christian backgrounds and others as well. I had friends who were Baha'i, who were Muslim, I grew up in Southern California, so there were lots of Mormons around as well. So I think having people believe very fundamental things that you are not always perfectly aligned with the way that I think about the world is just very comfortable to me. And that was true in so many aspects of our relationship from the get-go, not just religious ones, that it just is of a piece with our relationship. I'm fine with JD kind of having a different worldview at times and having to express mine and have us come to some kind of compromise or understanding. And that's part of what makes it all very interesting and part of, I think, what makes our family successful. Our children, I think, benefit from this back and forth, from knowing that mommy might say this and my daddy might think that, but fundamentally we're moving in the same direction together and we want the same things out of life for our family and for ourselves.
And sometimes you celebrate Mass here in this home.
We do, in this very room, actually, not with a dozen cameras around and bright lights. But Yeah, it's one of the rare privileges of this life is that priests will come, and I try not to do it too much, Bob, because the problem is, number one, you roll out of bed. Sometimes the kids will come down, they won't even have their shoes on. And I try to have a little bit more of a ritual to it. And so we do try to leave the house and actually go to church. And that's important. But sometimes, you have a late day at work or something's going on at the White House or something's going on in the world. And you say, could a priest just come by and say Mass at our house? And it makes it very easy. But it's one of those creature comforts of being vice president. I try not to use too much because I think it makes us a little lazy.
It's a perk, but I think it's also important to say that it's sometimes a necessity because a motorcade just shuts down streets, right? It means sometimes people can't get into Mass when they arrive. It means that you have people trickling in after the start because they're being put through magnetometers. And so we try, especially, with timing of Mass and location and everything to mitigate all of these discomforts for all the other people who are just trying to live their lives.
We try to go to smaller churches and we try to get there exactly on time. Because if we get there 10 minutes earlier, then they mag everybody and then it's just a nightmare for everybody else. So you try to obviously take your kids to church, but you also try to do it in a way that doesn't inconvenience everybody. That's very important to us.
President Kennedy, when he was president, used to go to St. Stephen Martyr in Washington, D.C. He would sit in the back to try to not be disruptive. What is it like for you to go to Mass, whether it's here at this home or at a Catholic church?
Well, it's actually a relatively familiar experience because I grew up, like I said, around people, a very diverse faith community, including friends who were Catholic. So I've been to their first communions and other celebrations. I've been to Catholic weddings and so on. So it's a familiar format. And this is maybe a dorkier way of coming at it, but my undergraduate and graduate work as a historian was very closely related to the history of Christianity and its development during the early modern period. So there's also just a lot that I know about it, if that makes sense. And it's interesting and thought-provoking and very meaningful to see it practiced today.
She also knows more about it than I do.
I do think it's fair to say that when he became Catholic, I had a broader foundation in the history of Catholicism and its practices than he did, which was really fascinating to see, because he'd have these revelations about things, and I'd say, well, yeah, even though it's not my personal faith. So I find my own ways of taking meaning from it, and I do listen to what they're saying, during the sermons, and I do listen to the ways that it changes week after week, and I find that valuable in my own way.
So much of the vice president's new book is about his journey from being this person who was vaguely atheist to being a practicing Roman Catholic today. We know him today as he is, as vice president of the United States, a practicing Catholic. You knew him when he was this other person, as he describes himself. What was he like then? And how drastic is this change to who he is today in terms of faith?
Well, he may have called himself an atheist or maybe an agnostic at the time, but he had been raised in a sort of varied evangelical faith tradition. So it's not like that wasn't a part of the way that he thought about the world. In some ways, being an atheist was kind of a separation from what had come before, but it still came through. His past, his background, and the foundation that he got from his grandmother still came through. So there are a lot of continuities. That said, I think he's more reflective at this stage of life. Some of that just comes with age, with fatherhood, with maturity, and sort of seeing how the world developed. But some of it comes with religion and what it demands of him. And I do think that is really valuable, both in our personal relationship. He's maybe more reflective in our conversations about, what's happening in our marriage, what we think about things. He's also just more comfortable, I would say, in himself today than he was then, when he felt like he was searching for something and didn't know what it was. He feels like he has found that something in a very meaningful way, and that's really nice. That's something that you want for someone that you love.
How do you feel as a couple bringing a fourth child into the world? The world's a kind of a wild place sometimes. Does it bring you anxiety, joy, a little bit of both?
Well, my view is that the world is always a chaotic place. There are always dangers in the world. There are always uncertainties. But having children has given me a sense of purpose and it brings infinite joy and hope for the future. So I don't see having a child right now as any different from having a child 9 years ago when our first child was born. There's still that sense of promise that comes with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's different in the sense that there are creature comforts of being the vice president of the United States. We have this beautiful house. We have, like I never have to drive the kids and then, yell at them in the back seat to stop hitting their brother, hitting their sister. We just have Secret Service that drives us around now. So there are these sort of little ways in which life is just more convenient, I think, to bring a new baby into the world. So that's something that I'm actually looking forward to a little bit. Obviously, we travel around in Air Force Two now, which is a great benefit to our family. So it's not like I have to, drag 4 kids through the TSA pre-check line anymore. It's different in that way. But I think fundamentally, Usha said it better than I could, which is that having a baby is fundamentally, I think, a hopeful thing. I think you have to have some hope for the future. And I think both of us have a lot of hope for the future. And it's hard not to when you spend your life around a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. Just the perspective that they have on life and on everything, how fresh and exciting everything is. It's hard not to feel very good about the world. And that's kind of how I think about this new baby is he's going to come into a very loving family, a very stable family. He's going to have some siblings who may be annoyed when he starts to steal their toys, but that's normal stuff that all kids experience. And we're very lucky to be able to live the life that we lead. And I think our baby is going to come into a family that's in a very, very good spot, and where he's going to be able to grow and thrive and experience the world and God's creation in all these fascinating ways. And that's all I could really hope for out of a new life. And I'm grateful that we're doing it again.
Do you have a name in mind?
We don't. No, we're actually really terrible at choosing names. We kind of brainstorm on our own, and then we eventually sit down over a meal and start listing them, and we just veto all of the names until we find one that we both like. So that day is coming for us, I think.
I think with all 3 of our kids, it's been a very intense process because we have very different perspectives on what we should name a kid. I feel like she gets the final veto because she's obviously the person who does the most work here. But what we've done with, I think 2 of them, and maybe all 3 of them, is we didn't actually really name them. I think with Mirabelle, we knew going into the delivery.
Yeah, and with Ewan as well, we had selected his first name, but I think we did a coin flip for his middle name to see how we felt about it.
Yeah, so to 2 of our 3 kids, we literally went into the delivery room, at least partially unnamed. So some of it is you look at the baby, you kind of get a feel for it then, and then you figure it out. So I'm sure, number one, the baby will have a name that we will both be happy with, but we are not there yet.